The Last Dawn at Thornbury. A Hercule Poirot mystery. Welcome to the Poirot Archives. Tonight we descend into the fog-shrouded valleys of Yorkshire, where Thornbury Manor stands sentinel against time itself, a monument to old money and older secrets. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrive not for pleasure, but summoned by a desperate telegram that spoke of danger lurking in ancestral shadows. The morning mists that embrace Thornbury will soon reveal more than autumn's chill. Join us for The Last Dawn at Thornbury, a tale of inheritance, betrayal, and the terrible price of silence, crafted in homage to the masterful Agatha Christie, whose genius we honor, though this mystery unfolds on our own terms. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. Now, let the story unfold. Chapter 1. Shadows Before Dawn. The Yorkshire moors stretched endlessly beneath a pewter sky as our motor car wound through the narrow country road. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, gripped the door handle as we navigated another sharp turn, the autumn fog growing thicker with each mile from the station. "Steady on, Hastings," murmured my companion, Hercule Poirot, his egg-shaped head perfectly still, despite the vehicle's swaying. "We approach our destination intact, I assure you." Through the mist, Thornbury Manor materialized like something from a Gothic novel. 3 stories of weathered stone and leaded windows, ivy creeping up its eastern wall like frozen lightning. The great house squatted atop its hill, surrounded by ancient oaks whose branches seemed to reach toward it in supplication or warning. "Rather grim, isn't it?" I observed. "Mais oui, but observe closer, mon ami." Poirot's gloved finger pointed toward the windows. "Everyone ablaze with light at 4 in the afternoon. This speaks of fear, not hospitality." Our driver pulled into the circular drive, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Before we'd fully stopped, the massive oak door swung open, revealing a thin man in butler's attire whose hands trembled slightly as he descended the steps. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he intoned, though his voice cracked on the surnames. "Lord Thornbury awaits you in the drawing-room, most urgently." Poirot adjusted his tie, already perfectly positioned, and we followed the butler, whose name we learned was Crawford, through an entrance hall dominated by oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. Their eyes seemed to track our movement, and I suppressed a shiver that had nothing to do with the October chill. The drawing-room proved more welcoming, with a fire roaring in an enormous hearth, and electric lamps banishing shadows to the corners. 5 people turned as we entered, tension visible in every line of their bodies. Lord Thornbury stood by the mantelpiece, a man of perhaps 70, with iron-grey hair and the bearing of one accustomed to command. Yet his hands gripped his brandy glass too tightly, knuckles white. "Poirot," he said without preamble, "thank God you've come. I fear for my life." "Lord Thornbury," Poirot bowed slightly. "Perhaps introductions first. The little grey cells, they function better with context." "Of course." Lord Thornbury gestured to an elegant woman of 50, seated on the sofa, diamonds glittering at her throat. "My wife, Lady Vivian. Married 2 years now." Something flickered across his face. Regret. Fear. Lady Vivian extended a manicured hand. "Monsieur Poirot, my husband speaks highly of your abilities." Her tone suggested skepticism beneath the courtesy. "My children from my first marriage," Lord Thornbury continued. A man of 40 rose from a wing chair, soft-featured with nervous eyes behind wire spectacles. "My son, Peter." Peter Thornbury's handshake was damp. Father's being dramatic, I'm sure. These threats are quite real, interrupted a younger woman standing by the window. She had her father's strong jaw and direct gaze. I'm Margaret Thornbury. Someone in this house intends to kill him. Meg, please, murmured the final occupant, a man in his 30s with the weathered look of one who spent time outdoors. You're frightening, Mother. Lady Vivian's laugh was brittle. I'm hardly your mother, Robert. Robert Carlyle flushed. My apologies, Lady Vivian. Force of habit from before. Poirot's eyebrows rose minutely. I caught his meaning. Robert had known the family before the second marriage. The plot, as they say, was already thickening. The threats, Poirot prompted gently. Tell me of these. Lord Thornbury moved to his desk, withdrawing 3 letters from a drawer. They began a fortnight ago. He handed them to Poirot, who studied each with minute attention. Your dawn approaches. Poirot read aloud. The sun sets on thieves. And this last one, the 20th, brings justice. He looked up. Today is the 18th of October. 2 days, Margaret said flatly. Someone plans to murder my father in 2 days. The letters were slipped under my study door, Lord Thornbury added. Always at night. Crawford found them in the morning. Poirot examined the paper. Expensive cream stock, the kind found in any good stationer's. The writing was block letters, carefully formed to disguise the author's hand. No one saw who delivered them? The servants retire at 10, Crawford supplied, by Lord Thornbury's standing orders. He values his privacy in the evenings. Father likes his brandy and cigars without an audience, Peter said, attempting levity that fell flat. This house, Poirot mused, it has been in your family long. 300 years, Lord Thornbury said with pride. Thornburys have always held Thornbury. Until now, Margaret said quietly. Her father's face darkened. What do you mean by that? Nothing, she replied, but her glance toward Lady Vivian spoke volumes. Poirot walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. Tell me who benefits from your death, Lord Thornbury. The estate is entailed, Peter said quickly. It passes to me, regardless. But the money, Robert interjected, then caught himself. Forgive me, it's not my place. No, continue, Poirot encouraged. You are family, no? Robert glanced at Lord Thornbury, who nodded grudgingly. Robert is my late wife's nephew. He manages the estate farms. Has done for 10 years. The money, Poirot repeated. Lord Thornbury's jaw tightened. My personal fortune, separate from the entailed estate, is mine to dispose of as I wish. My will currently divides it between my children and my wife. Currently, Poirot's head tilted. Father's been making changes, Margaret said. Haven't you? Meeting with Mr. Whitmore twice this week. My solicitor, Lord Thornbury explained. And my business is my own, Margaret. The fire crackled in the ensuing silence. I noticed Lady Vivian's fingers drumming against her skirt, the only sign of agitation in her composed facade. Perhaps, Poirot suggested, we might see your study, the room where these letters appeared. Lord Thornbury led us down a portrait-lined corridor to a heavy oak door. The study beyond was quintessentially masculine. Leather-bound books, hunting trophies, the lingering scent of tobacco. A drinks cabinet stood open, crystal decanters gleaming. My sanctuary, Lord Thornbury said. I retire here every evening at 9, alone. Poirot examined the door's threshold, then the carpet within. This door, it locks? Always. I have the only key. Lord Thornbury produced it, an ornate brass affair that looked as old as the house. yet letters appeared beneath. Poirot murmured. Most curious. And you noticed nothing? No footsteps. No shadows under the door. I'm often deep in my reading. Or correspondence. He gestured to a stack of papers on his desk. Poirot's attention shifted to the drinks cabinet. You take brandy each evening? Without fail. Doctor's orders, oddly enough. For my heart. Lord Thornbury attempted a smile. Dr. Harrington says a single brandy aids circulation. The same doctor who attends the family? For 20 years, yes. He lives in the village. Sterling fellow. Poirot lifted one of the decanters, examining the level of liquid within. And this is refilled when? Crawford sees to it weekly, every Sunday. I see. Poirot's fingers traced the window frame. These windows, they are secure? Locked always. Have been since the threats began. As Poirot continued his examination, I studied the family photographs on the mantelpiece. One showed a younger Lord Thornbury, with a delicate-looking woman and 2 children, clearly Peter and Margaret in their youth. The woman's eyes held a sadness that seemed to leap from the frame. Your first wife, I ventured. She passed away. 15 years ago, Lord Thornbury said curtly. Pneumonia. A terrible loss, Poirot said softly, though his eyes remained sharp. And you remarried too. Years passed? Yes. Vivian brought new life to this old house. From somewhere in the manor, a clock chimed 5. The sound seemed to remind Lord Thornbury of the advancing hour. You'll stay, of course, both of you. I've had rooms prepared. Mais certainement, Poirot agreed. The 20th approaches quickly. We must be vigilant. As Crawford appeared to show us to our rooms, I noticed Margaret lingering in the doorway, her expression troubled. Monsieur Poirot, she said quietly, there's something you should know about the will changes. Her father's sharp voice cut through the air. Margaret, that's enough. She retreated, but not before I caught her mouthing. Later. Our rooms were adjacent on the 2nd floor, overlooking the mist-shrouded grounds. As I unpacked, Poirot appeared in my doorway, mustache quivering with thought. What do you make of it, Poirot? I asked. I make of it, mon ami, that Lord Thornbury fears the right thing for the wrong reasons. The danger is real, but not perhaps as he imagines. You mean the letters might be a distraction? I mean, Poirot said carefully, that in this house of shadows and secrets, everyone watches everyone else. Yet no one sees the truth. The little grey cells, they perceive patterns already. But come, dinner awaits, and with it, more revelations. As we descended for dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a carefully constructed trap. But whether we were the hunters or the hunted remained to be seen. Chapter 2. The Silent Hour. Dinner at Thornbury Manor proved to be an exercise in carefully maintained facades. The dining room, illuminated by a massive chandelier, could have seated 30. Our small party clustered at one end of the mahogany table, like survivors huddled around a campfire. Lord Thornbury presided from the head, Lady Vivian to his right, Margaret to his left. Peter sat beside his stepmother with visible discomfort, while Robert had positioned himself as far from the family drama as the seating allowed. Poirot had been given the place of honour opposite our host, while I sat between Margaret and Robert. The pheasant is excellent, Lady Vivian observed, though she'd barely touched hers. Cook has outdone herself. Mother's recipe, Margaret said quietly. The first Lady Thornbury's, I mean. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Lady Vivian's smile tightened. How nostalgic. Margaret insists on keeping everything exactly as it was, Peter said, shooting his sister a warning look. Sometimes I think she prefers the past to the present. Some things, Margaret replied, were better before. Lord Thornbury's fork clattered against his plate. Enough. We have guests. Poirot, who had been observing this exchange with keen interest, delicately dabbed his moustache with his napkin. Change, it is difficult for families, no? The old ways comfort, yet life must progress. Precisely, Lady Vivian said, seizing on his words. This house needs modernizing. Electric heating instead of these drafty fireplaces. Proper bathrooms instead of ancient plumbing. Over my dead body, Lord Thornbury growled, then blanched at his own words. Robert cleared his throat. Speaking of modernizing, Uncle, the Southfields need new drainage. The yields have been declining for 3 years. We'll discuss business tomorrow, Lord Thornbury said dismissively. If there is a tomorrow. Father, please, Peter protested. You're being morbid. Am I? Someone in this very room might be planning my murder. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Crawford, supervising the serving, nearly dropped the wine decanter. The young housemaid Jenny actually did drop a serving spoon, the clatter explosive in the silence. That's quite enough, Charles, Lady Vivian said sharply. You're frightening the servants. Good. They should be frightened. They should be watchful. Lord Thornbury's eyes swept the table. One of you knows something. One of you must. Actually, Poirot interjected smoothly, I would like to speak with each of you privately after dinner. Beginning with you, Lady Vivian, if you would be so kind. She nodded, gracefully. Of course, though I don't know what help I can provide. I'm rather new to the family mysteries. 2 years, Margaret murmured. Hardly new any more. After dinner, Poirot and I established ourselves in the morning room for the interviews. Lady Vivian entered with perfect posture, settling into a chair with practiced elegance. In the lamplight, I could see she was still quite beautiful, though lines of strain marked her eyes. Lady Vivian, Poirot began gently, tell me how you met Lord Thornbury. At a charity function in London. For war widows, my first husband died in the Somme. Charles was generous with his donation, and we struck up a conversation. She smiled slightly. He was lonely. His wife had been dead 13 years. The children were grown. This house was eating him alive with memories. Yet you moved here, to the source of those memories. Her composure cracked slightly. He wouldn't leave Thornbury. The estate is his identity. So I came here, to this mausoleum where his first wife's ghost lurks in every room. The children resent you. Margaret despises me. Peter tolerates me. Robert, she paused. Robert is kind, but he loved his aunt deeply. I'm an interloper to all of them. And the will changes Lord Thornbury mentioned. Lady Vivian's fingers tightened on her handkerchief. I knew nothing of them until Margaret brought it up. Charles doesn't discuss financial matters with me. I have my settlement from my first husband's estate. I don't need Thornbury money. Yet you would inherit under the current will? A third, yes. The standard widow's portion. The rest to Peter and Margaret equally. She met Poirot's eyes directly. I don't want him dead, Monsieur Poirot. This house would be unbearable without him. They barely tolerate me with him, alive. Imagine if he were gone. After she left, Peter entered, fidgeting with his spectacles. Up close I noticed his suit was expensive but worn, his shoes polished but clearly old. Money troubles, Monsieur Peter? Poirot asked directly. Peter flushed. Is it that obvious? Yes, I've had some Unfortunate investments. Father knows. He's helped twice before, but he said no more. Learn to live within your means, he says, as if I haven't tried. The estate income is insufficient. The entailed estate barely breaks even. Robert manages it well, but agriculture isn't what it was. The real money is father's personal fortune, his investments, his business interests, all of which he controls absolutely. You would benefit from his death? Peter's laugh was bitter. Would I? The estate would be mine, yes, but with it the crushing expenses. And my share of his fortune would clear my debts, with enough left for a modest life. Hardly worth killing for. Men have killed for less, Poirot observed. Not this man, Peter said firmly. I may be weak, Monsieur Poirot, but I'm not evil. Margaret came next, sweeping in with the authority of someone who'd been running the household since adolescence. She sat ramrod straight, hands folded, eyes direct. You wished to tell me something earlier, Poirot prompted. About the will? Father's been meeting with Mr. Whitmore about establishing a trust. Everything would go into it, managed by trustees, with only small allowances for Peter and me. Lady Vivian would get her widow's portion outright, the only one who'd have free access to money. You object to this arrangement. I object to that woman slowly taking everything that was my mother's. First her place, then her house. Now the fortune my mother's family helped build. Margaret's controlled facade cracked slightly. Did you know my mother brought significant money to the marriage? Her dowry saved Thornbury when my grandfather nearly lost it to debt. Yet your father remarried. Men are weak, she said flatly. Vivian is beautiful, charming when she chooses. Father was lonely, and she played him perfectly. You believe she married for money? What else? Love. Margaret's laugh was harsh. She's 20 years younger than him. She could have married anyone after her first husband died. She chose a rich, elderly widower with a heart condition. Heart condition. Didn't he mention it? That's why Dr. Harrington prescribed the evening brandy. Father's heart has been weak for 5 years. Any shock, any stress. She trailed off meaningfully. Robert was the last to enter, bringing with him the faint smell of pipe tobacco and earth. His handshake was firm, calloused from actual work. I'm not really family, he began without preamble. I shouldn't even be at these dinners. But Uncle Charles insists. He values you. He values my work. I've increased the estate's yields by 30% since taking over. Not that it matters much against modern, industrial farming. Robert's voice held genuine sadness. These old estates are dinosaurs, Monsieur Poirot. We're just managing their decline. Yet you stay. Where else would I go? This is my life. My aunt took me in when my parents died. I was 12. Thornbury is home, even if I'm just the poor relation who works the farms. Tell me about the first Lady Thornbury. Robert's face softened. Aunt Eleanor was luminous, kind, intelligent, devoted to her children. Her death nearly destroyed Uncle Charles. And Margaret, she was only 15. She tried to become her mother overnight, running the house, caring for Peter. And now Lady Vivian has taken that role. She's taken the title, Robert said carefully. The role. Margaret still runs everything. Vivian just decorates the position. Poirot leaned forward. Who, in your opinion, would want Lord Thornbury dead? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Want him dead? Several people, probably. He's not an easy man, but actually, kill him. That's different. Murder requires desperation, or hatred. I see plenty of resentment in this house, but murder. He shrugged. Though I suppose we'll find out in 2 days. After Robert left, Poirot sat in silence, fingers steepled. I waited, knowing better than to interrupt his thoughts. Hastings, he said finally, what time is it? I checked my watch. 9:30. Ah, Lord Thornbury will be retiring to his study for his evening brandy. Come, we must observe the routine. We found Lord Thornbury in the hallway, heading toward his study. He seemed surprised to see us. Gentlemen, I thought you'd retired. A small experiment, if you permit, Poirot said. Your evening ritual. Show us exactly how you proceed. Lord Thornbury shrugged and unlocked his study door with the ornate key. We followed him inside, watching as he went straight to the drinks cabinet, selected a crystal tumbler, and poured a measure of brandy from the cut glass decanter. Always the same glass? Poirot inquired. Yes, my father's. Tradition. He settled into his leather chair by the fire, brandy in hand. I sit here, read correspondence or a book, finish my drink, and retire by 11. And you lock the door behind us when we leave? Always. As I said, I value my privacy. One more thing, Poirot said, moving to examine the door's threshold again. These letters that appeared, always in the same spot? Yes, just inside the door. Crawford finds them when he comes to air the room each morning. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. We bid Lord Thornbury good night, listening as the lock clicked firmly behind us. As we walked toward the stairs, Poirot paused, looking back at the study door. The impossible room, Hastings. Locked from inside, yet letters appear. The little grey cells, they are troubled by this impossibility. Perhaps there's another key. Perhaps. Or perhaps the impossible is merely improbable, disguised by misdirection. As we climbed the stairs, a figure emerged from the shadows. Crawford, the butler. Monsieur Poirot, he whispered urgently, might I speak with you? Privately. We followed him to a small sitting room, used by the servants. Crawford wrung his hands nervously. It's about the letters, sir. I haven't been entirely truthful. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Continue. The third letter. I didn't find it in the morning. I saw someone slip it under the door. At 2 a.m, 3 nights ago. Who? I demanded. Crawford's face was agonized. I couldn't see clearly. The hallway was dark, but it was someone in a dark dressing gown. Someone who knew exactly where they were going. Someone from inside the house. Poirot murmured, Why didn't you speak of this before? Lord Thornbury, he's been good to me. 20 years of service. If someone in the family is involved, I thought perhaps it was just to frighten him. I never imagined actual murder. And now I'm terrified, sir. The 20th is nearly here, and I believe someone truly means to kill him. Chapter 3. Questions in the morning light. I awoke to urgent knocking at my door. Pale morning light filtered through the curtains. Dawn had barely broken. Crawford stood in the hallway, his normally composed face etched with panic. Captain Hastings, sir, please wake Monsieur Poirot. It's Lord Thornbury. He's collapsed. I threw on my dressing gown and roused Poirot, who emerged immaculate despite the early hour, not a hair out of place. We followed Crawford's hurried footsteps down the corridor to Lord Thornbury's bedroom. The scene inside was one of controlled chaos. Lord Thornbury lay in his 4-poster bed, face grey, breathing laboured. Dr. Harrington, a sturdy man of 60 with capable hands, bent over him with a stethoscope. Lady Vivian stood at the foot of the bed in a silk negligee, her face pale. Margaret, already dressed despite the hour, gripped the bedpost while Peter hovered near the door in striped pyjamas, looking thoroughly shaken. What happened? Poirot asked quietly. Dr. Harrington looked up. His heart. Severe arrhythmia. I've given him digitalis, but... He shook his head grimly. Lord Thornbury's eyes fluttered open, finding Poirot. Poisoned, he gasped. The brandy. Last night. Charles, don't try to speak, Lady Vivian pleaded, moving toward him. He recoiled from her touch. Stay. Back. His gaze fixed on Poirot again. Test. The brandy. Dr. Harrington frowned. Lord Thornbury, you're having a cardiac episode. The stress of these threats. Non, doctor, Poirot interrupted. We must consider all possibilities. Crawford, secure the study immediately. No one enters. As Crawford departed, Lord Thornbury's breathing grew more ragged. He clutched at Poirot's sleeve. The 20th. Too early. They couldn't wait. Father! Margaret pushed forward, taking his hand. Who? Who did this? But Lord Thornbury's eyes rolled back, his body convulsing. Dr. Harrington pushed everyone away, working frantically, but it was too late. At 6:47 on the morning of October 19th, Lord Charles Thornbury, master of Thornbury Manor, drew his last breath. The room fell silent except for Lady Vivian's sudden sob. Margaret stood frozen, still holding her father's cooling hand. Peter slumped against the doorframe, spectacles askew. Only Robert, who had appeared moments before the end, maintained composure, though his jaw was clenched tight. Murder, Poirot said softly but clearly. This is now a matter for the police. You can't be serious, Dr. Harrington protested. His heart has been weak for years. The strain, the brandy, doctor. Lord Thornbury believed he was poisoned. We must test it. I'll telephone Inspector Bradshaw from the village, Crawford said quietly, returning from securing the study. While we waited for the police, Poirot insisted everyone gathered in the drawing room. The family sat in shocked silence, the reality of Lord Thornbury's death settling over them like a shroud. It's my fault, Peter said suddenly. The threats, the stress. I should have convinced him to leave, to go to London. Don't be ridiculous, Margaret snapped, though her voice trembled. Father would never have left Thornbury. He was frightened, Lady Vivian said quietly. Last night, after you all retired, he came to my room. Said he'd change his mind about the will. He was going to call Mr. Whitmore first thing this morning. Margaret's head snapped up. Changed how? I don't know. He wouldn't say. Just that he'd been unfair. That he needed to make things right. How convenient, Margaret said, coldly, that he dies before making these mysterious changes. Margaret, Peter exclaimed, you can't suggest... Can't I? Who benefits most from Father dying today instead of tomorrow? That's enough, Robert intervened firmly. The inspector will sort this out. Inspector Bradshaw arrived within the hour, a thin, eager man who seemed overwhelmed by both the grandeur of Thornbury Manor and the presence of Hercule Poirot. The Hercule Poirot? He stammered. The Belgian detective? What are you doing here? Lord Thornbury feared for his life. He summoned me 2 days ago. Alas, we were too late. But Dr. Harrington says it was his heart. Test the brandy, Poirot insisted. The decanter in his study, the glass beside it. Test everything. Bradshaw nodded, sending for the police surgeon and arranging for the brandy to be analyzed. Meanwhile, Poirot received permission to examine the study before it was sealed. The room looked exactly as we'd left it the night before. The brandy glass sat empty on the side table, a ring of dried liquid at its bottom. The decanter remained 3/4 full. Poirot bent close, sniffing carefully. Almonds, he murmured. Very faint, but distinct. Cyanide, perhaps, though that would act faster than what we witnessed. Unless... He turned to me. Hastings, what time did Lord Thornbury retire last night? You saw him at 9:30. He stayed in his study until 11, according to Crawford. And he was taken ill at dawn, 7 to 8 hours. Poirot's moustache twitched. Not cyanide, then. Something slower. Digitalis, perhaps. Ironic, given his heart condition. Inspector Bradshaw looked confused. But Dr. Harrington gave him digitalis this morning. Precisely. A small dose is medicine. A large dose. Poirot shrugged eloquently. We returned to the drawing-room to find Mr. Whitmore, the solicitor, had arrived. A small, precise man with nervous hands, he clutched a leather portfolio. I came as soon as I heard, he said. Lord Thornbury called me yesterday evening. Said to come first thing this morning with the will documents. He wanted to make changes. What changes? Margaret demanded. Mr. Whitmore adjusted his spectacles. He didn't specify on the telephone. Just said he'd made a terrible mistake and needed to rectify it immediately. So the current will stand? Peter asked. I'm afraid I cannot discuss the contents until... Oh, come now, Lady Vivian said, wearily. We all know what's in it. A third to me, the rest divided between Peter and Margaret. The question is what he intended to change. He gave no indication. Poirot pressed. None. Though Whitmore hesitated. He did say something odd. He said, the sins of the past shouldn't punish the innocent. I assumed he meant the trust arrangement he'd been considering. Poirot began to pace, hands behind his back. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, how long have you been Lord Thornbury's solicitor? 22 years, since just before his first wife's death. You knew the first Lady Thornbury? Slightly. A lovely woman. Her death was tragic. So young, so sudden. Sudden. Poirot's head tilted. But I understood she died of pneumonia. Yes, but it came on quickly. She was healthy one week, dead the next. Lord Thornbury was devastated. He blamed himself for not calling Dr. Harrington sooner. Margaret stood abruptly. Must we discuss ancient history? My father lies dead upstairs, and you're talking about my mother's death 15 years ago. Forgive me, mademoiselle, Poirot said gently. But in my experience, the past often holds the key to the present. These threatening letters. They spoke of justice, of dawn, of thieves. Old words for new crimes, perhaps. Or new words for old crimes, Robert said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at him. He flushed but continued. I only mean, perhaps someone believed Lord Thornbury had done something years ago. Something that demanded retribution. That's absurd, Peter protested. Father was difficult, yes, but he was an honourable man. Was he? Lady Vivian's voice was strained. How well do any of us really know another person? Charles had secrets. We all do. The police surgeon arrived then, a brisk young man who immediately set about examining the body and collecting samples. Poirot drew Inspector Bradshaw aside. Inspector, I need the household interviewed separately. Also examine all medicine cabinets, particularly Dr. Harrington's supplies. You suspect the doctor? I suspect everyone, Inspector, including the dead man himself. Bradshaw looked shocked. Suicide, but the letters were slipped under a locked door by someone inside this house. Lord Thornbury knew his life was in danger. What if he knew because he planned it himself? But why? Poirot's expression was grave. Guilt, perhaps, or to frame someone for murder. or to prevent something worse from being revealed. The little grey cells, they see many possibilities. I spent the rest of the morning assisting Bradshaw's constables in searching the manor. In Lady Vivian's room, we found sleeping draughts prescribed by Dr. Harrington. In Peter's, bottles of stomach medicine and nerve tonic. The man was clearly more anxious than he appeared. Margaret's room was Spartan, almost monastic, with only basic toiletries and a photograph of her mother on the bedside table. Robert's room, located in the older servants' wing despite his relation to the family, proved most interesting. Along with expected agricultural journals and farming equipment catalogues, we found a stack of letters tied with ribbon. Love letters, from the glimpse I caught, though the constable quickly bagged them as evidence. It was Crawford who provided the day's most shocking revelation. Under questioning, he admitted to something he'd kept hidden. "The morning I found the first letter," he said, wringing his hands, "I also found something else. A glass in his lordship's study, one that shouldn't have been there. A woman's glass, smaller, with lipstick traces." "What did you do with it?" Bradshaw demanded. "I washed it, sir. Put it away. I thought his lordship had entertained someone privately. It wasn't my place to judge." "Lipstick," Poirot mused. "What colour?" "Deep red, sir, like Lady Vivian wears." "Or Margaret," Crawford added reluctantly. "She sometimes wears her mother's lipstick, the same shade her mother always wore." That afternoon, the preliminary test results arrived. The brandy contained traces of digitalis, enough to trigger a fatal heart episode in someone with Lord Thornbury's condition. But more interesting was what else the police surgeon found. Traces of a sedative in the dregs of the brandy glass. 2 substances, Poirot announced to the assembled household. 1 to sedate, 1 to kill. Either 2 poisoners, or one very clever one who wanted Lord Thornbury unconscious before the digitalis took effect. Why, I wonder? "So he couldn't call for help," Peter suggested. "Or so he couldn't change his will," Margaret said, staring at Lady Vivian. "Or," Poirot said quietly, "so he couldn't reveal what he knew about someone else's crime." The drawing room fell silent. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the moors, casting Thornbury Manor into premature darkness. One day early, death had claimed Lord Thornbury. But the question remained. Whose hand had guided it? Chapter 4. Secrets in the Study. The afternoon following Lord Thornbury's death, Poirot assembled us in the study, the very room where the fatal brandy had been consumed. Inspector Bradshaw stood by the door, notebook in hand, while the family arranged themselves with visible reluctance around the room, where their patriarch had spent his final evening. "We progress," Poirot announced, his egg-shaped head gleaming in the lamplight. "The brandy was poisoned. This we know, but the how remains clouded. This room was locked. Lord Thornbury had the only key. Yet someone entered and contaminated his brandy." "The window?" Peter suggested, half-heartedly. "Perhaps locked from inside, undisturbed dust on the sill," Poirot dismissed. "No, the poison was introduced differently. Crawford, you refilled the decanter when?" "Last Sunday, sir, as always." "And Lord Thornbury drank from it each evening since?" "Without fail, sir." Poirot lifted the decanter, examining it against the light. "Then we have our first curiosity. If the poison was in the decanter since Sunday, why did Lord Thornbury only die today? Unless—" He turned to Dr. Harrington, who had been summoned to provide medical insight. "Doctor, the digitalis concentration found, would it have been fatal immediately?" Dr. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. Well, that's the peculiar thing. The concentration was high, but not immediately lethal. It would build up over several doses. Several doses, Poirot repeated. So Lord Thornbury had been drinking poisoned brandy for multiple evenings. It would seem so. The symptoms would have been gradual. Fatigue, slight nausea, perhaps some confusion. Lady Vivian gasped. Charles complained of feeling tired all week. He said he wasn't sleeping well. Why didn't he call me? Dr. Harrington demanded. You know how he was about doctors, Margaret said bitterly. Mother begged him to call you sooner when she fell ill, if he had. That's enough, Margaret, Peter interjected. But Poirot's attention had fixed on Margaret with laser intensity. Your mother's illness. Tell me about it. Why? She's been dead 15 years. Humour me, mademoiselle. Margaret's jaw tightened. She caught a chill at the autumn festival. Father said it was nothing. Wouldn't call Dr. Harrington. By the time he finally did, pneumonia had set in. She died 3 days later. I did everything I could, Dr. Harrington said defensively. But pneumonia in those days, without modern antibiotics, of course, Poirot soothed. No one blames you, doctor. But tell me, the symptoms of digitalis poisoning and pneumonia, could they be confused? The room went deadly silent. Dr. Harrington's face drained of colour. Surely you're not suggesting... I suggest nothing. I merely inquire. Robert spoke up unexpectedly. Aunt Eleanor was taking heart medication before she died. I remember because she asked me to fetch it from the village pharmacy once. Heart medication. Margaret turned on him. Mother never had heart problems. She did, Dr. Harrington admitted reluctantly. Minor palpitations. I prescribed a mild digitalis preparation. Very mild. Poirot began to pace, his patent leather shoes clicking on the hardwood. So we have two Lady Thornburys, 15 years apart, both exposed to digitalis. One dies of pneumonium. One's husband dies of digitalis poisoning. Curious, no? You're reaching, Lady Vivian said sharply. Eleanor's death was natural. The whole village attended her funeral. She was beloved. Indeed. Yet someone hated Lord Thornbury enough to poison him. The letters spoke of justice, of dawn, of thieves. Old words, as I said. Perhaps old grievances. Inspector Bradshaw cleared his throat. Speaking of letters, we've analyzed the handwriting. Block letters, carefully disguised, but our expert notes feminine characteristics in the letter formation. All eyes turned to the three women in the room. Lady Vivian stood straighter. Margaret's hands clenched. And even Jenny the housemaid, who'd been bringing tea, nearly dropped the tray. Furthermore, Bradshaw continued, the paper came from the household supply. The watermark matches the stationery in Lord Thornbury's desk. So it was someone in the house, Peter said unnecessarily. But we knew that, Robert pointed out. Crawford saw someone deliver the third letter. Ah, yes, Poirot said. Someone in a dark dressing gown at 2 a.m. Crawford, you remembered nothing more specific? Crawford hesitated, glancing around the room. The figure was medium height. Could have been anyone, really. But they moved confidently, knowing exactly where to go. Someone familiar with the house, Poirot murmured. He moved to the drinks cabinet, examining the other decanters. Tell me, who else drinks brandy in this house? I take a glass occasionally, Lady Vivian admitted. Charles would invite me to join him sometimes. Father never invited anyone to his evening ritual, Margaret contradicted. He invited me, Lady Vivian insisted. Last Tuesday, in fact. We discussed the household accounts. Can anyone confirm this? Bradshaw asked. Charles and I were alone, but Jenny brought glasses, 2 glasses. Jenny nodded nervously when questioned. Yes, sir. His lordship asked for 2 glasses Tuesday evening. So Lady Vivian had access to the brandy, Margaret said triumphantly. As did you, Lady Vivian countered. You have your father's key to the study, don't you? The spare he gave you when you ran the household. Margaret's face flushed. I returned that key when you became mistress here. Did you? Charles mentioned just last week that you'd been in his study, looking through Mother's letters. That's not... I had permission, ladies, Poirot interrupted. These accusations serve no purpose. Let us return to facts. The love letters found in Robert's room, perhaps you could explain those, Monsieur Carlyle. Robert's weathered face darkened. They're private. They're evidence, Inspector Bradshaw corrected, from someone named E. Margaret gasped. E, as in Eleanor. You had an affair with my mother? No. Robert's vehemence was startling. Never. Eleanor was... she was perfection. I loved her, yes, but from a distance. She never knew. But the letters were never sent, Robert said quietly. I wrote them, but never sent them. She was my uncle's wife. I would never have dishonored her so. How noble, Lady Vivian said dryly. A man of such honor. Yet you kept the letters all these years. They were all I had of her. Poirot studied Robert intently. You loved her that much? More than life itself. And you believed Lord Thornbury responsible for her death. Robert's silence was answer enough. Yet you stayed, Poirot continued, managing his estate, dining at his table. Why? For Margaret and Peter. They needed stability after losing their mother. And Robert struggled for words. Thornbury is my home. Whatever Charles did or didn't do, this land isn't to blame. Dr. Harrington spoke up. This is all speculation. Eleanor died of pneumonia. I signed the death certificate. Are you questioning my medical judgment? I question everything, Doctor, Poirot replied. For instance, I question why you prescribed digitalis to Lord Thornbury, when you knew it could be dangerous with his heart condition. It's a standard treatment, in proper doses, but someone knew about those proper doses, didn't they? Someone with medical knowledge, or access to medical information. Half the household takes some form of medication, Peter protested. We all know about dosages. True, Poirot conceded, but let us consider the sedative found in the brandy glass. Not in the decanter, only in the glass. This suggests it was added separately, the night of Lord Thornbury's death. Who had access to sedatives? Lady Vivian's sleeping draughts, Margaret said quickly. Your father's own prescription, Lady Vivian countered. He took them occasionally. As do I, Peter admitted. Nerve trouble. The medicine cabinet in the upstairs bathroom contains various sedatives. Dr. Harrington added. Any family member could access them. Poirot moved to Lord Thornbury's desk, running his fingers along its surface. This desk, it locks. Yes, Crawford confirmed. His lordship locked it each night. Yet the threatening letters were written on paper from inside this desk. So either the desk was left unlocked, or someone had a key, or... Poirot pulled at one of the drawers. It stuck, then opened. Ah, the lock is broken. It's been broken for years, Margaret said. Father never bothered fixing it. He said the study lock was sufficient. So anyone who knew about the broken desk lock could take paper, Bradshaw noted. Which was everyone in the household, Peter said defeatedly. Poirot suddenly knelt by the fireplace, examining the grate. What have we here? He retrieved Something with his handkerchief. A small, partially burned piece of paper. It appears to be part of a letter. The writing is not blocked. It's cursive. He held it to the light. Only a few words were visible. Cannot continue this deception. Eleanor would never. Margaret snatched at it, but Poirot held it away. Patience, mademoiselle. Inspector, this must be analyzed. He studied the fragment again. The ink is faded. This letter is old, years old, I would guess. Father burned mother's letters. Margaret's voice cracked. Why would he do that? Perhaps, Poirot said gently, because they contained truths he couldn't bear to preserve. Lady Vivian moved toward the door. This is exhausting. My husband is dead, and you're all picking over ancient history, like vultures. History that may explain his murder, madame. Poirot said, Tell me, when exactly did Lord Thornbury propose to you? She paused. 2 years ago. October, actually. October 20th. The room froze. October 20th. The date in the threatening letter. The anniversary, Margaret whispered. Mother died on October 20th. Father proposed to his new wife on the anniversary of Mother's death. I didn't know, Lady Vivian protested. He never told me the significance of the date. Yet someone knew, Poirot said. Someone who saw it as a betrayal worthy of death. The question remains, who? Thunder rumbled outside, and rain began to lash against the windows. The study, with its shadows and secrets, seemed to close in around us. One among us was a murderer. But as I looked at each face, grieving, suspicious, afraid, I couldn't begin to guess who had finally sought justice for Eleanor Thornbury's death, 15 years too late. Chapter 5. The Thornbury Legacy. The storm that had threatened all afternoon broke with full fury that evening. Rain hammered against the windows of Thornbury Manor like 1,000 desperate fingers seeking entry. The electricity flickered twice during dinner, a grim affair of cold meats and strained silence, before failing entirely, plunging us into candlelight. How appropriate, Margaret murmured, watching shadows dance across the ancestral portraits. The house returns to its true nature. Poirot had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, his little grey cells clearly working overtime. I recognized the signs, the distant gaze, the occasional twitch of his magnificent moustache, the untouched food on his plate. After dinner, he requested a private audience with Dr. Harrington. I accompanied them to the library, where a fire had been hastily lit against the growing chill. Doctor, Poirot began without preamble, I wish to discuss Eleanor Thornbury's death in detail. Dr. Harrington settled heavily into a leather armchair. In the flickering firelight, he looked every one of his 60 years. I have already told you everything. You have told me facts. Now I wish for impressions. Poirot leaned forward. You treated Lady Eleanor for years. What was she like? The doctor's expression softened. Gentle, intelligent. Too good for this gloomy place, if I'm honest. She brought light to Thornbury. Her relationship with Lord Thornbury. Complicated. Harrington chose his words carefully. Charles was devoted in his way, but he was possessive, controlling. Eleanor gave up much of her independence when she married him. Was she happy? At first, the children brought her joy, but as the years passed, he shook his head. She confided in me once that she felt trapped, said she'd made a terrible mistake but saw no way out. When was this confession? Perhaps a month before she died. Poirot's eyebrows rose. And you never thought this significant? She had a chill. It progressed to pneumonia. Tragic, but hardly suspicious. Harrington shifted uncomfortably. though I admit her decline was unusually rapid. The digitalis she was taking, who prescribed it? I did. Mild palpitations, as I said. And who administered the doses? Harrington paused. Lord Thornbury insisted on handling her medication himself. He said she was forgetful. So Lord Thornbury controlled his wife's digitalis supply, Poirot said quietly. And a month after she expressed feeling trapped, she died of an illness with symptoms remarkably similar to digitalis poisoning. The fire crackled in the ensuing silence. Harrington's face had gone pale. You're suggesting Charles murdered Eleanor? I am suggesting, Poirot said carefully, that someone in this house believed he did. And that belief, festering for 15 years, finally demanded satisfaction. But who? The children adored their mother, but they also loved their father. Did they? Peter seems more relieved than grieved, and Margaret. Her devotion to her mother's memory borders on obsession. Margaret was 15 when Eleanor died. She worshipped her mother. Old enough to suspect, old enough to remember, old enough to wait. Poirot stood, pacing before the fire. Tell me, Doctor, do you believe Lord Thornbury killed his first wife? Harrington was silent for a long moment. I've wondered, he admitted finally. Over the years, certain things troubled me. The speed of her decline. Charles's insistence on managing her care. His lack of grief afterward. Lack of grief. He mourned publicly, of course. But within months, he was back to his routines. His brandy, his study, his control over everything. And then the women. Women. There were rumors. Village gossip, mostly. That Charles had been seeing someone before Eleanor died. That he'd grown tired of his wife. Do you know who this woman was? No, I never credited the rumors. Charles was many things but unfaithful. He seemed devoted to Eleanor in his way. After Harrington departed, Poirot sat in contemplative silence. I poured us both a whiskey from the library supply, carefully avoiding the brandy. What are you thinking, Poirot? I am thinking, mon ami, that this household contains more secrets than a confessional. Lord Thornbury was not the victim he appeared. He was, perhaps, a murderer himself. And someone killed him in revenge for Eleanor. It would explain the letters. Your dawn approaches. Eleanor died at dawn. The sun sets in thieves, a thief of life. The 20th brings justice, the anniversary of her death. But who knew? Who suspected? That, Hastings, is what we must discover. The next morning dawned grey and sodden, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Poirot requested access to the attic storage, where household records were kept. Crawford led us up narrow stairs to a vast space beneath the eaves, filled with trunks, furniture draped in sheets, and boxes of documents dating back generations. Lady Eleanor's belongings are there, Crawford pointed to a corner. Miss Margaret insisted they be preserved exactly as they were. Has anyone accessed them recently? Miss Margaret comes up occasionally. No one else, to my knowledge. Poirot approached the trunk marked E.T. Personal Effects. He opened it reverently, revealing carefully folded dresses, jewelry boxes, and stacks of correspondence tied with faded ribbon. Her letters, Poirot murmured, lifting a bundle. Perhaps here we find our answers. We spent hours sorting through Eleanor Thornbury's correspondence. Most were mundane. Letters from friends, invitations to social events, notes from family. But one bundle, hidden at the bottom beneath a false lining, proved explosive. Hastings, Poirot breathed. Look at this. The letters were love letters, passionate, desperate, written in a flowing hand. But they weren't from Lord Thornbury, and they weren't from Robert. My dearest Eleanor, Poirot read aloud. Every moment apart is agony. When will you tell him? When will we be free? I cannot continue this deception. Eleanor would never... He stopped. This phrase, it matches the burned fragment from the study. Who wrote them? Poirot examined the signature. They are signed only with a letter. H. H. Who in this household? I stopped. Harrington. Dr. Harrington. Perhaps, or perhaps another entirely. Poirot continued reading. Listen to this. Charles suspects nothing. He is too consumed with his own affairs, literally. I saw him with her again yesterday, near the old mill. He doesn't deserve you, my love. He never did. Charles was having an affair, I said. And Eleanor knew she was having one of her own. We. A tangled web of deception. But see here, the final letter. Poirot's voice grew grave. Eleanor, you must be careful. I fear Charles has discovered us. He questioned me yesterday, his eyes like ice. If he knows, you are in danger. Please say nothing. Do nothing until I return from London. I will find a way to protect you. Forever yours, H. The date? October 15th, 15 years ago. 5 days before Eleanor died. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the attic's cold. So, Eleanor's lover warned her that Charles knew about the affair, and 5 days later, she was dead. And Charles, Poirot added, was also having an affair. With whom, I wonder? The answer came from an unexpected source. As we descended from the attic, we encountered Jenny, the housemaid, on the stairs, her face tear-streaked. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, I need to tell you something. About the old lord and lady. We retreated to a quiet alcove. Jenny twisted her apron nervously. My mother was a maid here, before me. She told me things. Before she died last year. What things, child? About Lord Thornbury and my mother's sister, my Aunt Sarah. She was Lady Eleanor's personal maid. Lord Thornbury had an affair with his wife's maid. Jenny nodded miserably. It went on for years. Aunt Sarah thought he would marry her after Lady Eleanor died, but he sent her away instead. Gave her money to keep quiet, and banished her from the county. Where is your aunt now? Dead, sir. Died 10 years ago. Consumption. But she never forgave him. Never stopped hating him. Did she have children? Jenny hesitated. One, a daughter. Given up for adoption when Aunt Sarah was sent away. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered. And this daughter. Do you know what became of her? I only learned recently, sir. After my mother died, I found letters. Aunt Sarah had tracked her daughter down. They'd been corresponding in secret. Who is she, Jenny? Who is Sarah's daughter? Jenny's voice dropped so low I barely heard her. Lady Vivian, sir. Lady Vivian is my cousin. The revelation struck like lightning. Lady Vivian, the daughter of Lord Thornbury's former mistress. A woman abandoned. Her mother cast aside and ruined. A woman who had returned to Thornbury Manor as its new mistress. Does Lady Vivian know you are cousins? Poirot asked. I don't think so, sir. We look nothing alike, and I never mentioned it, but she must know who her mother was. She must know what Lord Thornbury did to Aunt Sarah. And yet she married him. Perhaps that was her revenge, sir, becoming what her mother never could. Poirot was already moving. Hastings, we must find Lady Vivian immediately. But Lady Vivian had disappeared. Her room was empty, her coat and umbrella gone. Crawford reported she'd left the house an hour earlier, saying she needed air. In this weather? I said skeptically. Find her, Poirot ordered. Search the grounds. She may be in danger, or she may be destroying evidence. We split up. I took the gardens while Poirot headed toward the old mill mentioned in Eleanor's letters. The grounds were a quagmire of mud and fallen leaves, the ancient oaks dripping with residual rain. I found nothing in the gardens or the greenhouse. But as I approached the family chapel, a small stone structure at the edge of the property, I heard voices. Female voices, raised in anger. I crept closer, pressing against the chapel's wall. You knew. Margaret's voice, sharp with accusation. You knew all along what he did to my mother. I knew what he did to mine, Lady Vivian replied. Her composure cracked. Your mother wasn't the only victim in this house. So you killed him. For revenge. I didn't kill him. I wanted to, God knows. When I discovered who I really was, what he'd done to my mother, I dreamed of it. But I didn't do it. Then who did? Silence. Then Lady Vivian's voice, barely audible. Perhaps someone who loved Eleanor more than life itself. I burst through the chapel door, startling both women. Margaret held a rusted garden trowel, like a weapon. Lady Vivian stood before the altar, mascara streaking her cheeks. Ladies, I said, trying to sound authoritative. Poirot needs to speak with you both. Immediately. As I escorted them back to the manor, I couldn't shake Lady Vivian's words. Someone who loved Eleanor more than life itself. Robert had professed such love, but his letters were never sent, unless there was another lover entirely, one whose initial was H. Chapter 6. Truth in the mist. The drawing room had become our war room. Poirot stood before the fireplace, arranging and rearranging objects on the mantelpiece. A candlestick, a letter opener, a small porcelain figurine, as if their positions might unlock the mystery's solution. I had reported my discovery at the chapel, and Lady Vivian had been subjected to intense questioning. She admitted everything about her parentage, but maintained her innocence in Lord Thornbury's death. I came here for answers, she said. Her earlier composure shattered. My mother died believing she'd been wronged. I wanted to understand why. When I met Charles at that charity event, I recognized his name immediately. I cultivated the relationship deliberately. You married your mother's seducer, Margaret said with disgust. I married my father's. No. Lady Vivian caught herself. Charles wasn't my father. My mother was already pregnant when she came to Thornbury. The affair came later. Charles never knew about me, never knew Sarah had a child before they became involved. So you married him for revenge? I married him for justice. I wanted to take everything he valued. His name, his home, his precious legacy. And then I wanted to watch him suffer. By killing him, Inspector Bradshaw interjected. By living, Lady Vivian said fiercely. By being the mistress of Thornbury, sleeping in Eleanor's bed, wearing her position. Every day I stayed was a victory against everything he'd done to my mother. Yet someone killed him before you could complete your revenge, Poirot observed. This must frustrate you greatly. Frustrate me? It destroyed everything. His death ends my triumph. I'm just another widow now, soon to be evicted when Peter inherits. Not necessarily, Mr. Whitmore, who had been summoned again, interjected. Under the current will, you receive your widow's portion, regardless of where you live. A third of his fortune, Margaret said bitterly. The daughter of a servant, taking a third of mother's money. Your mother's money came from her family. Lady Vivian shot back. Money your father nearly squandered on his gambling before Eleanor's dowry saved him. Don't lecture me about inheritance, Margaret. Your father was a thief long before he was a murderer. Enough. Poirot's voice cracked like a whip. The room fell silent. These accusations serve nothing. Let us focus on facts. He began to pace, hands clasped behind his back. We have established several truths. First, Lord Thornbury likely murdered his first wife 15 years ago, slowly poisoning her with the same digitalis now used against him. Second, Eleanor had a secret lover, known only as H, who warned her of danger before her death. Third, Lady Vivian is the daughter of Lord Thornbury's former mistress, come to Thornbury for revenge. Fourth, someone in this house knew all of this and decided to mete out justice. The killer must be someone who loved Eleanor, I said. The letters, the date, the method. It's all about her. Précisément, Hastings, but who loved Eleanor enough to wait 15 years, plan meticulously, and execute revenge with such precision. Robert, Peter suggested. He admitted loving her. His letters were never sent, Poirot reminded us. Eleanor may not have known of his feelings. Dr. Harrington, Lady Vivian said. The H in the letters. He had medical knowledge, access to digitalis, opportunity. The doctor has been questioned extensively. His alibis for the nights the threatening letters appeared are solid. He was attending patients in the village, witnessed by multiple people. Then who? Margaret demanded. Who else would care enough about my mother to kill for her? Poirot stopped pacing. His eyes swept the room, resting briefly on each face. Tell me, when did each of you first learn, or suspect, that Lord Thornbury had murdered Eleanor? Silence. Then, hesitantly, Peter spoke. I never believed it. Not truly. Mother was ill. She died. That's what I told myself. And yet doubt lingered. Peter removed his spectacles, polishing them nervously. Father changed after she died. Became harder, colder. I told myself it was grief, but sometimes I wondered if it was guilt. Margaret's face was stone. I knew. Not immediately, but over time. I watched him, studied him. The way he avoided her portrait, never spoke her name. Guilty men have tells, Monsieur Poirot. My father was consumed with guilt. When did you become certain? 5 years ago. I found a letter in his desk, one he'd forgotten to burn. It was from Dr. Harrington, expressing concern about the digitalis situation. Father had asked about increasing mother's dose without her knowledge. You found evidence of murder and said nothing. What could I say? Accuse my own father based on a single letter? Destroy what remained of our family? Margaret's voice cracked. I chose silence. I've regretted it every day since. So you wrote the threatening letters instead, Poirot said quietly, to frighten him, to make him confess. Margaret's head snapped up. What? No, I didn't. The handwriting analysis indicated feminine characteristics. The paper came from his desk, which you could access through the broken lock. You knew about the anniversary significance. You had motive, means, and opportunity. I didn't write those letters. I wanted him to suffer, yes, but through guilt, not fear. I wanted him to look at me every day and know that I knew. That was my revenge. Then you poisoned him instead? No. Margaret was on her feet now. I hated him, but he was still my father. I wouldn't. Sit down, Margaret, Robert said gently, rising to guide her back to her chair. His hand lingered on her shoulder protectively. Poirot's eyes narrowed at the gesture. Robert, you have been remarkably quiet throughout these proceedings. I have nothing to add. I loved Eleanor. I never acted on it. I stayed at Thornbury for the children's sake. That's all. Is it? You said your letters to Eleanor were never sent. Yet I found this. Poirot produced a small folded paper from his pocket, hidden in a hollowed book in Eleanor's trunk. A book of poetry, well worn, clearly treasured. Robert's face went grey. My dearest Robert, Poirot read. Your letter moved me beyond words. To know that someone sees me, truly sees me, in this prison of a marriage. It gives me strength to endure. I cannot promise more than friendship, but please know that your devotion is the light in my darkness. Forever grateful, Eleanor. She wrote back to you, Margaret whispered. She knew. Robert sank into his chair. Yes, she knew. We exchanged letters for almost a year. Nothing improper ever happened between us, I swear it. But she knew I loved her, and she cared for me. This changes everything, Bradshaw said excitedly. You had even more motive to kill Charles? Yes, but I didn't. I've spent 15 years protecting his children, managing his estate, pretending I didn't suspect what he'd done. If I were going to kill him, why wait so long? Perhaps, Poirot said slowly, you were waiting for something, or someone. His gaze shifted to Lady Vivian. When did you first contact Robert, madam? Lady Vivian's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. How did you... The letters in Robert's room. Inspector Bradshaw assumed they were Robert's old letters to Eleanor. But the ribbon was new, purchased within the last year. And the handwriting, while disguised, matches yours. You've been writing to each other, Peter exclaimed. Stepmother and cousin conspiring behind our backs. Not conspiring, Robert said wearily. Vivian contacted me after she discovered who she really was. She wanted to know about Eleanor, about the household. I told her what I knew, what I suspected, including your belief that father murdered mother. Margaret said. Her voice had gone cold. You told this stranger our family secrets. She's not a stranger. She's... Robert stopped. She's what? Poirot prompted. Lady Vivian answered. He's my half-brother. My mother's first pregnancy. Before she came to Thornbury. It was Robert's father's child. But she was unwed. Disgraced. The baby was given to her sister to raise. That baby was Robert's mother. The revelation struck the room like a thunderbolt. Robert and Vivian related by blood through the tangled history of servants and scandal. So Robert's mother was your aunt's sister's child, I said, trying to follow the genealogy. That makes you cousins of sorts. Lady Vivian said, the family trees of servants are as complicated as those of nobles, Captain Hastings. We found each other through old letters after my mother died. Robert confirmed my suspicions about Charles and Eleanor. You planned this together, Margaret accused. The marriage, the letters, the murder. We planned nothing beyond my marriage, Lady Vivian insisted. I wanted justice through living well. Robert wanted to protect your mother's memory. Neither of us wanted blood. And yet blood was spilled, Poirot said. Lord Thornbury is dead. The threatening letters were real. The poison was real. Someone in this room is lying. He moved to the window, staring out at the mist-shrouded grounds. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer, more contemplative. The little grey cells, they have been troubled by this case. Too many suspects, too many motives, too many secrets. But now, at last, the pattern emerges. He turned back to face us. The murderer is clever, très clever. They use the oldest trick in the mystery, hide in plain sight. They created a web of suspicion so tangled that we would exhaust ourselves chasing shadows. Just tell us who, Peter demanded. Patience, Monsieur Peter. First, let us eliminate the impossible. Poirot began to count on his fingers. Lady Vivian had motive, but not method. She could not access the study regularly enough to administer poison over several days. Peter had debt, but not hatred, and, frankly, not the intelligence for such a subtle crime. Peter sputtered indignantly, but said nothing. Robert had motive aplenty, but his alibi for the night of the final letter holds. He was in the village, playing cards with 3 farmers until dawn. Inspector Bradshaw confirmed this. That leaves Margaret, Bradshaw said. Margaret had access, motive, and knowledge. But Margaret made one critical error in my investigation. She was too obvious. She drew attention to every suspicious detail, every hint of her father's guilt. A true murderer would deflect, not illuminate. Then who? I asked, bewildered. Poirot smiled grimly. Consider the method, Hastings. Digitalis poisoning over several days, culminating in a heart attack triggered by a final concentrated dose mixed with sedative. This requires medical knowledge, access to drugs, and intimate familiarity with Lord Thornbury's routine and condition. Dr. Harrington, Lady Vivian breathed, his alibis, Bradshaw began. Were for the nights the letters appeared, Poirot interrupted, but the letters were a distraction. The real crime, the poisoning, happened during daylight hours, during regular medical visits. He was treating father's heart condition, Margaret said slowly. He visited twice a week, and during those visits he had private access to Lord Thornbury, his medications, his brandy. He knew exactly how much digitalis Lord Thornbury could tolerate because he had been carefully increasing the dose in his medical treatments while simultaneously adding it to the brandy. But the H in Eleanor's letters, I said. You said the doctor's alibis were solid. For the threatening letters, yes. But H was indeed Dr. Harrington. He was Eleanor's lover 15 years ago. He warned her that Charles had discovered their affair. And 5 days later, Charles killed her with the very medication Harrington had prescribed. The room was utterly silent. Dr. Harrington has carried this guilt for 15 years, Poirot continued. He blamed himself for Eleanor's death. If he hadn't prescribed the digitalis, Charles couldn't have weaponized it. When Lady Vivian arrived and began asking questions about the past, it reopened old wounds. He knew who she was? Lady Vivian asked. He suspected. The resemblance to your mother is subtle but present. And when he learned that Charles was changing his will, potentially disinheriting Eleanor's children in favor of the daughter of his former mistress. Poirot shook his head. It was too much. Justice delayed, demanded to become justice delivered. The threatening letters, I said. They weren't from the killer. Oh, but they were, Hastings. But not to frighten Lord Thornbury. To misdirect us. Dr. Harrington knew Poirot had been summoned. He created the letters to suggest an inside conspiracy. A family member with a grudge. While we investigated the household, he continued his slow poisoning during his legitimate medical visits. Can you prove any of this? Bradshaw asked. Poirot reached into his jacket and withdrew a small glass vial. This was found in Dr. Harrington's medical bag this morning, while we were questioning Lady Vivian. Concentrated digitalis solution, far beyond any therapeutic dosage. And this, he produced a folded letter, was hidden in the false bottom of the same bag. His confession, written but never sent, addressed to Eleanor's grave. My darling, Poirot read, his voice heavy with sorrow. 15 years I have watched your murderer prosper. 15 years I have smiled and bowed and tended his worthless heart while yours lies still. No more. I will give him the death he gave you, slow, inexorable, invisible. And when it is done, I will join you at last. Forgive me for taking so long. Your eternal love, Henry. Henry Harrington, I said quietly. He signed his full name. A confession meant for death, not discovery. He intended to take his own life after Lord Thornbury died. But we arrived too soon. The household became too chaotic, and he lost his nerve. "Where is he now?" Margaret demanded. As if in answer, the drawing-room door opened. Dr. Harrington stood in the doorway, his face pale but composed. Behind him a constable hovered uncertainly. "I heard my name," Harrington said quietly. "I presume you've worked it out, Poirot." "Indeed, Doctor. You killed Lord Charles Thornbury." "I executed him," Harrington corrected. "There's a difference. He murdered the only woman I ever loved. The law couldn't touch him. No one even suspected. So I became the law myself." "And the letters? The October 20th deadline?" "Poetic justice. He killed Eleanor on that date. I intended to kill him on the anniversary. But his heart, it gave out a day early." A ghost of a smile crossed Harrington's face. Even in death, Charles Thornbury couldn't follow the plan. Inspector Bradshaw stepped forward with handcuffs. "Dr. Henry Harrington, I am arresting you for the murder of Lord Charles Thornbury." Harrington offered his wrists calmly. "I've been ready for this for 15 years, Inspector. The only regret I have is that it took so long." As they led him away, he paused at the door, looking back at the assembled family. "Margaret, Peter, your mother was extraordinary. She deserves so much better than the life she was given. Remember her light, not his shadow." Then he was gone, and Thornbury Manor fell into stunned silence. Chapter 7. The Last Dawn. The morning of October 20th dawned clear and bright, a bitter irony given the date's dark significance. The mist that had shrouded Thornbury Manor for days lifted at last, revealing grounds glittering with frost, and a sky of pale, washed blue. I found Poirot in the breakfast room, immaculate as always, his egg precisely soft-boiled, his coffee steaming in a delicate china cup. He seemed contemplative, his dark eyes distant. "You solved it, Poirot," I said, taking my seat across from him. "Justice is served." "Is it, Hastings?" He set down his spoon carefully. "Lord Thornbury murdered his wife 15 years ago. He escaped human justice entirely, lived in comfort, remarried, prospered. Dr. Harrington murdered Lord Thornbury in revenge. He will hang, or at best spend his remaining years in prison. Tell me, mon ami, where is the justice in this equation?" Harrington took the law into his own hands. "That's wrong, regardless of his reasons." "Undoubtedly. Yet I find myself with sympathy for him that I cannot entirely suppress." Poirot sighed. He loved Eleanor Thornbury with a pure and patient devotion. He waited. He watched. He suffered in silence. When he finally acted, it was not from malice, but from a grief that had curdled into something darker, over 15 years of impotence. "You're not excusing murder?" "Never. But I am acknowledging its complexity." He lifted his coffee cup. "The law sees only the act. Hercule Poirot sees the human heart beneath it. Twisted, perhaps, but still recognizably human." Margaret appeared in the doorway, dressed in deep mourning. She looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, may I join you?" "Of course, mademoiselle." She sat heavily, accepting coffee from Crawford with a nod of thanks. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, then my mother's, then Dr. Harrington's. "You knew the doctor well?" "He delivered me. He treated every childhood illness, every scraped knee. He was practically family. She laughed bitterly. Apparently more family to my mother than I ever knew. Your mother loved you, Poirot said gently. Whatever her relationship with Dr. Harrington, her devotion to you and Peter was genuine. I have read her letters. Your names appear constantly. Your achievements, your struggles, your futures. She lived for her children. Margaret's eyes glistened. Then why didn't she leave him? If she knew what he was, if she had someone who loved her properly. Because leaving was not simple for women of her generation, especially those with children, and no independent means. And perhaps because she hoped to protect you from the scandal of divorce. Poirot shook his head. We cannot judge Eleanor Thornbury by modern standards. She did what she believed was best. And father killed her for it. Your father killed her because he discovered her emotional attachment to another man. His pride could not tolerate the suggestion that his wife might find comfort elsewhere. Poirot's voice hardened slightly. Charles Thornbury was a man who believed he owned everything he touched. His estate, his fortune, his wife. When Eleanor's heart proved beyond his possession, he destroyed her rather than accept the loss. Robert entered then, followed by Peter and Lady Vivian. The family, such as it was, gathered for what would likely be their final breakfast together at Thornbury Manor. Mr. Whitmore is coming at 11, Peter announced, to discuss the will and everything else. Will it stand? Margaret asked. Father's murder. Does that affect the inheritance? Harrington wasn't a beneficiary, Robert pointed out. The crime doesn't involve any of us legally. No, Lady Vivian said quietly, but morally, ethically. I've been wondering whether I have any right to Charles's money, knowing what I know. You came for justice, Poirot observed. You achieved it, in a fashion, though not by your own hand. Justice. Lady Vivian shook her head. I came for revenge disguised as justice. There's a difference, isn't there? I wanted Charles to suffer because he made my mother suffer. I told myself it was righteous, but it was just hate, dressed up in better clothes. And now? Now I'm tired. Tired of hate, tired of secrets, tired of this house and everything it represents. She looked at Margaret and Peter. I'll waive my widow's portion. Your mother's money should go to your mother's children. Peter's jaw dropped. You'd give up a third of the fortune? I'd give up all of it. I have my first husband's settlement. It's more than enough to live comfortably. I didn't marry Charles for money, whatever you believe. I married him for victory. Now that he's dead, the victory feels hollow. Margaret studied her stepmother with something approaching respect. You're serious. Completely. Have Whitmore draw up whatever documents are necessary. I'll sign them today. That's unexpectedly decent of you. Perhaps I'm more my mother's daughter than I thought. She was decent, you know, before Charles ruined her, before this house poisoned everything it touched. The breakfast concluded in contemplative silence. Afterward, Poirot requested a final walk around the grounds before our departure. I accompanied him gladly, grateful for the fresh air after days of close rooms and closer secrets. We walked through the formal gardens, past the greenhouse and the stables, toward the small family chapel, where I had discovered Margaret and Vivian arguing the day before. What will happen to them all, I asked. Peter will inherit the estate and manage it badly, I suspect. Robert will continue to actually run things while Peter takes the credit. They will muddle along as such families do. And Margaret? Margaret will leave Thornbury. Poirot seemed certain. She has carried her mother's memory like a millstone for 15 years. Now that the truth is known, she can finally set it down. I suspect she will travel. Paris, perhaps, or Rome. Somewhere bright and warm, where ghosts cannot follow. Lady Vivian will return to London society with a fascinating story of tragedy and noble sacrifice. Her reputation will be enhanced rather than damaged. The widow who gave up her inheritance out of principle. Très romantique. She will remarry within 2 years, I predict, to someone thoroughly ordinary and desperately dull. She has had enough excitement. And Dr. Harrington, Poirot's expression sobered. He will face trial. The evidence is conclusive. His own confession most damning of all. Given the circumstances, a sympathetic jury might show mercy, but I doubt it will matter. He is an old man who has accomplished his life's purpose. Whether he hangs or rots in prison, his spirit has already departed. We reached the chapel, its ancient stones glowing golden in the morning light. The door stood open, and we entered the cool interior. Simple wooden pews faced a modest altar, and memorial plaques covered the walls. Generations of Thornburys, their dates of birth and death carved in stone. Poirot paused before one plaque, smaller and less ornate than the others. Eleanor Grace Thornbury, 1879-1909. Beloved wife and mother, in light. We remember. Beloved wife, Poirot murmured. A lie carved in stone for eternity. Charles Thornbury's final. Deception. Pretending in death the devotion he never showed in life. At least she's remembered now, I offered. The truth is known. Is it? Her children know their father was a murderer. Her lover has become a murderer in turn. Her memory, rather than being honored, has become a source of pain and scandal. Poirot shook his head. Sometimes, Hastings, the truth does not set us free. Sometimes it merely transfers the prison from one generation to the next. That's unusually pessimistic, even for you. Perhaps. He turned from the plaque, moving toward the door. But I am thinking of what might have been had Eleanor Thornbury lived. Had she and Dr. Harrington found the courage to flee together? Had Charles Thornbury been exposed and punished when justice might still have healed, rather than wounded? You can't change the past. No, but we can learn from it. Poirot stepped into the sunlight, squinting slightly. The lesson of Thornbury Manor is this: secrets are poison. They corrupt everything they touch, destroying not only those who keep them, but those who inherit them. Margaret, Peter, Robert, Lady Vivian, all of them have been warped by secrets that were never theirs to bear. We walked slowly back toward the house, where Crawford was loading our luggage into the waiting motor car. The household had gathered on the front steps to see us off, a formal courtesy that felt strangely appropriate. Margaret stepped forward, extending her hand. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot, for the truth, however painful. Truth is always painful, mademoiselle, but it is also necessary. Like surgery, it wounds in order to heal. Will we heal? In time. The scar will remain, but the infection is gone. He bowed slightly over her hand. Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become. Remember that. Peter shook hands briskly, clearly eager to see us gone. Robert's grip was firmer, his eyes communicating gratitude he couldn't speak aloud. Lady Vivian merely nodded, her composure restored, already retreating behind the social mask she wore so well. As our motor car descended the long drive, I looked back at Thornbury Manor one final time. The great house stood against the October sky, its windows catching the morning light, its stones the color of old bone. Beautiful and terrible, proud and corrupt, a monument to generations of privilege built on foundations of deceit. You're thinking deep thoughts, Hastings. Poirot's voice held a note of gentle amusement. I'm thinking about justice, I admitted. You solved the murder, caught the killer, proved his guilt. But somehow it doesn't feel like victory. Because it is not victory, mon ami. It is merely resolution. Victory would have been preventing Eleanor's death 15 years ago. Victory would have been Charles Thornbury facing justice for his crime. What we have achieved is only the final chapter of a tragedy that began decades before we arrived. Then why do we do it? Why solve murders if the solutions bring no satisfaction? Poirot was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was unusually soft, because the alternative is silence. Because without truth, there can be no healing. Because the dead deserve witnesses, even when the living would prefer to forget. He touched his moustache reflexively. Eleanor Thornbury died alone and undefended. Her murder disguised as illness. Her memory reduced to a lie on a chapel wall. Now, at last, she is seen. Her suffering is acknowledged. Her children know she was innocent. Is that enough? It must be, Hastings. It is all we can offer the dead. The dignity of truth. He smiled faintly. And perhaps a warning to the living. Secrets destroy. Lies corrode. The sins we bury do not stay buried. Sooner or later, the dawn comes and all is revealed. The motor car reached the main road, turning toward the village station and the train that would carry us back to London. I settled into my seat, watching the Yorkshire moors roll past, already composing the account I would eventually write. One more question, Poirot. We? The title, The Last Dawn at Thornbury. You mentioned it referred to the threatening letters, to Eleanor's death, to Charles's murder. But is there another meaning? Poirot considered this. Every dawn is a last dawn for someone, Hastings. For Eleanor, for Charles, for the Dr. Harrington we knew, the healer rather than the killer. For the Thornbury family as it was, with its secrets intact and its lies unchallenged. He gazed out the window at the brightening sky. But endings contain beginnings. The last dawn at Thornbury is also the first dawn of truth. What the family makes of that truth is their choice. You think they'll be all right? I think they will survive. Whether they thrive depends on whether they can forgive. Not Charles, who deserves no forgiveness, but themselves. For not seeing, for not speaking, for not saving Eleanor when she might have been saved. The train station appeared ahead, its platform empty in the early morning light. As we transferred our luggage and prepared to leave Yorkshire behind, Poirot made one final observation. There is no greater tragedy, Hastings, than love that is not spoken. Robert loved Eleanor in silence. Harrington loved her in secret. Charles loved only himself and called it devotion. All that wasted love poisoning into grief and rage and murder. And the morale, Poirot smiled, that familiar twinkle returning to his eyes. The morale, mon ami, is simple. Speak the truth, love openly, and never ever trust a man who insists on pouring his wife's medicine himself. I laughed despite myself, and Poirot joined me. A moment of lightness after so much darkness. The train arrived, belching steam into the crisp morning air, and we boarded for London. Behind us, Thornbury Manor faded into the mist. Its secrets finally laid bare. Its ghosts finally at rest. The last dawn had come and gone, and with it the shadows had retreated. For now, the end